The Scream Kings are in no way responsible for any encounters with the paranormal, extraterrestrial abductions, eldritch insanity, hauntings, curses, hexes, demonic possessions, cryptozoological sightings, or any loss of sleep that results from listening to this podcast.
This is the Scream King podcast. I'm Max George.
And I'm Nathaniel Darkish.
Nothing can stop this demonic podcast. Even its final remnants will come after you. You must run. All you can do is run.
Ooh,
that was spooky. I did a ooh, not even for the excitement of this film, but because I'm proud of myself.
Good job, Max.
Thank you, Nathaniel. Everyone, we've got a bomb episode planned. We're talking Evil Dead Rise. So excited to break this down. I was very hyped for this film.
As was I. I think for both of us, this was like most anticipated movie of at least the first chunk of the year, except for, Spider-Verse, but that's a whole different, ball game.
Oh my gosh, we should do an entire episode for Spider-Verse because it is a perfect movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a horror movie by like any stretch, but regardless.
Yeah, it is a work of art. Go see that one, guys.
Yes.
Let's stay in this verse of Evil Dead. I mean, Evil Dead is some of our favorite films, from the original to the remake back in 2013.
Yes.
Like, Evil Dead always delivers, whether it's camp, comedy, or spectacular horror.
Mm-hmm.
This film slaps hard and bloody.
Definitely. And I mean, Evil Dead, it's funny because I think it's our third episode ever is when we talked about the first 4 films in the franchise.
Yeah.
And we talked about the Necronomicon, and you summoned a demon, and it was a good time.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I think that episode does a really good job of kind of capturing what we go for with this podcast. And so it feels very overdue to have another Evil Dead film to talk about. And also we have realized as we walked out of the movie theater that we also haven't covered Ash vs. Evil Dead, which is actually my personal favorite Evil Dead thing. And so expect some Ash vs. Evil Dead conversation to maybe get sprinkled in a teeny bit here, but mostly, in an upcoming episode.
Yeah, realistically, Evil Dead, or Ash v. Evil Dead, is just a phenomenal piece of TV, and it really deserves its own complete episode because it's brilliant. Bloody brilliant, you could say.
Very bloody, yeah.
We do have to kind of apologize. Our recording schedule has been
hell.
Yeah, it's been a little wild. I bought a house, so that's been crazy. And Nathaniel, you went to StokerCon.
I'm going to StokerCon this week. So I'm going to try to edit this episode tomorrow. So I'm recording this on Monday the 12th of June. I'm going to try to get this uploaded tomorrow, and then Thursday is StokerCon.
So fun.
So if you're listening to this and you are attending StokerCon, come find me. Just look at what my picture looks like on our website or on Twitter or whatever, and come say hi. I would love to chat horror with you. But yeah, so that's going to be amazing. I had a blast at StokerCon last year. I'm going to have another blast this year over in Pittsburgh. So just gonna be fully in the realm of all things spooky for several days, hanging out with some of the coolest horror writers and people around horror writing, just out there. So
Yeah, it will be cool. I'm excited to get the live updates. I think you sent me quite a few updates last time around, so this will be fun.
Yeah, I was mostly like pictures of me with Grady Hendrix and you calling me mean names.
Yeah, you can go to hell.
Yes. Yeah, it was something like that.
All right, should we dive into this?
Hell yeah.
I had the most beautiful dream. It was the perfect day. And all I could think about was how much I wanted to cut you all open and then climb inside your bodies so that we could stay one happy family.
All right, so Evil Dead Rise, the 2023 film, directed and written by Lee Cronin. So I guess before we get into the movie, have you seen any of Lee Cronin's other work?
I believe so. I'm terrible with names, so fill me in. What else has he done?
So he really hasn't done a ton, actually. So he did a film back in 2019 called The Hole in the Ground. And
I've heard that's actually really good.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. It's like one I've been wanting to see for a long time. It's been on my to-watch list, and I think this is going to be the thing that pushes me over to see it, because I, really enjoyed Evil Dead Rise. So I think that helped him get his foot in the door, and then he was also working on the 50 States of Fright series, which was a Quibi series from the very short-lived Quibi service. For those of you who have already forgotten what Quibi was, it was basically like content specifically for your phone. So all of all of it was like filmed with like holding your phone upright in mind, and so this was supposed to be this anthology series where like each episode was broken into like 3 or 4 pieces. Sam Raimi was the executive producer, kind of showrunner. He did the first story in the show, and so this is so Lee Cronin worked on a story for that, and presumably that was either where Sam Raimi really got to know him and trust him with Evil Dead, or at the very least he really liked some of his other stuff, and that's why he tapped him for both projects. So 50 States of Fright was a lot of fun. But again, Quibi lasted like 20 minutes, so I don't know if it's actually even like possible to find any of these episodes anymore. I'm guessing they're somewhere on the internet, but
I mean, yeah, sure, on the internet, but I think Quibi kind of died.
Oh yeah, it died after like 2 weeks. It was ridiculous.
But died hard, is what I mean.
Yeah. So,
but who knows? Go Google it.
Yeah, you might be able to find it. I mean, Sam Raimi had a fun story about a dude with like a golden arm that makes him evil. It's fun. It's fun. But anyway, definitely need to check out Hole in the Ground now that I've seen Evil Dead Rise. So, yeah, I liked that this is a relative unknown who brought such a strong entry to the series. I like that it's either been kind of Sam Raimi running the show for these, or and of course he was a relative unknown when he started making Evil Dead, and that he has tapped Lee Cronin, and then also Fede Alvarez for the 2013 film, who Fede was a little bit more well known, but even still wasn't like a huge name director either. So I like that he's kind of bringing people who have skills, but aren't necessarily going to be these massive names to the series. I think kind of having that more low budget, kind of indie filmmaker approach has done a lot of good for continuing to have this series have the feel and kind of charm that it does.
Yeah, definitely. And what I really liked too about Evil Dead Rise is probably more a comment on the entire franchise. It's very kind of basic in its approach.
Mm-hmm.
Typically have a family or a group of friends. You put them in a situation where they encounter the Necronomicon and chaos ensues. Bloody chaos ensues. And what I think was really fun about Evil Dead Rise is that it took that same formula but said, what if we did this in a modern setting in like a apartment complex? But at the same time, the film starts out in a cabin, and we kind of see this time reversal happen of where the events that the cabin encounter, kind of where they got their origin from. And so it gives us the cabin in the woods story that we're all so in love with when it comes to Evil Dead, but we also got something fresh, something new, and it did things well and it didn't do things well, and we'll get there.
Yeah. So, I mean, first is, like, let's just kind of talk a little bit about the story. I figure this is fresh enough that it wouldn't hurt to just kind of hit the major story beats, kind of in a more chronological order than the film presents them, maybe. So if you don't mind, I just kind of wanted to go through that, just so that way I think it'll give us a more directed approach to how we're discussing what we like and don't like.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically, Evil Dead Rise, as you mentioned, starts with the cabin stuff, but all of that actually happens after the main events of the film. So basically what we have is there's this family where we have Ellie, who is this single mom. Her husband has left her, and she has 3 kids, Bridget, Danny, and Cassie. They are, kind of ranging from, like, I don't know, Cassie must be like 6 or 7, maybe 8-ish, to, kind of late, like mid to late teens, like kind of 15, 16-ish. They're very atypical in terms of, the family dynamic. We see that they have a lot of weird stuff around their house. The son is blasting music and like to a ridiculous degree, and is doing stuff with records. We see that Ellie, her whole thing is that she is a tattoo artist. Cassie has this weird monstrosity of a doll head on a stick, which I'll get into more later.
A work of art, really.
Yeah, and so, like, they kind of have this kind of rough around the edges, very, liberal, very, it's not your, like, typical super clean nuclear family, as you'd stereotypically think. But basically, they're going through some hard times. Obviously, the dad of the family has just left. They are going to be evicted from their building, which has been basically condemned pretty soon. They have to find a new place to live. Finances aren't working out great. And then Ellie's sister, so the kid's aunt, Beth, shows up, kind of out of the blue because Beth, whose job is basically being a roadie, for different bands, like looks like she works at a venue and kind of handles a lot of the amps and kind of electronics for music performances. She is pregnant, and so she wants to go to her sister for advice, and then while there, things go horribly awry. There's an earthquake which unveils this ancient bank vault that's full of religious artifacts, including our Necronomicon, Naturum de Monto, and some records that relate to it. which then, of course, unleashes the Deadites. Ellie's the first one to become possessed. She is a very scary mother figure that chases them around and is real horrifying. Of course, the possession then spreads. So then, pretty soon, Ellie, Bridget, and Danny are all possessed Deadites, and Beth and Cassie have to escape them, as well as other Deadites from the neighbors in the halls and stuff, and eventually they make their way down to the ground level, which is very difficult, since they're on a high floor, and the elevator is not functional and fills up with blood, to basically be chased by this horrifying monstrosity version of the family members that has kind of formed into this big scary monster. And they then Beth has to take that on with weapons and a wood chipper to ultimately defeat them. And then, of course, the infection then gets some other random tenant of the building, who then goes to a cabin in the woods with her cousin and boyfriend, and she proceeds to then go for the kind of the prequel part of the film, where she goes full Deadite and then, you know, scalps her cousin and ultimately kills her boyfriend and takes a drone to the face, and then dramatically rises up out of the water. And that is our story.
Yeah. So there's a lot in it that is really good, and I think we should definitely kind of hone in right now on just the positives.
Yes.
So overall, I was surprised, I think, with this Evil Dead Rise, primarily because the Evil Dead that came out in 2013 kind of flipped the game a little bit. It took out all of the camp and a lot of the horror, or excuse me, a lot of the comedy, and really plugged in the horror. Like, the 2013 Evil Dead is not for the faint of heart.
Oh yeah, that movie is so terrifying and so brutal, and like, there is humor in it, but it's so twisted.
Yeah, it is an experience, and I don't let everyone who I know watch it just because it is pretty wild. It made me stop watching horror for like 3 days maybe, which is probably the worst any horror has done.
Yeah, it's it is truly a terrifying movie.
And so I was surprised with this one in that the camp, they've dialed it up quite a bit. It's not a comedic film by any means, but it kind of has these slapstick moments which almost feel out of place, but at the same time feel perfect.
Yeah, it's very much trying to stylistically fit within the earlier entries of the series, right? Like,
Agreed.
Sam Raimi, especially in Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness and Ash vs. Evil Dead, really, really gives us a lot of camp, a lot of slapstick, a lot of really silly things that are still kind of upsetting. Especially, I mean, and some are very, very upsetting. And some of these tributes that we have here are like direct nods to moments in Raimi's, you know, previous films. You know, one moment was even like very much a nod to what is that freaking movie called? It's the movie he directed that Drag Me to Hell.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
There's like one moment in this movie that's directly a nod to Drag Me to Hell. With how slapsticky it is. I'll say that, yeah, like the humor was less present in this film than Evil Dead 2 or the Raimi related work of the series that came after that. But it is still funny. But it is, kind of more of the dark humor, the like, oh, that was messed up, but I am kind of uncomfortable, but I'm going to laugh at how uncomfortable it was, as well as just like, you burst out laughing just because of how just off the wall bonkers, they decide to go with some of the slapstick. You know, there's a part where an eyeball gets popped off of someone and it pops into someone's mouth or throat, and they're choking on it, which is definitely the reference to getting an eyeball in the throat from Drag Me to Hell. And
that was the moment too for me where I was like, okay, this is different than the first remake. Like, they're doing something different here, and I love it.
Yeah, and like, we have the doll stick thing, which is so the little girl whose name I've already forgotten, even though I just said it. It was Cassie. She basically has been told that there's like a ghost or something that's haunting their apartment building, and so she's made this basically doll head on a stick to scare it away, and she's named it Staphany, which I absolutely love. And of course, someone gets Staphany's pointy end right through the head, and it is gruesome and upsetting, but also inherently kind of hilarious because it's just so disconnected from anything that even feels like it could possibly happen, but is absolutely the most Evil Dead kind of thing that could happen.
Happening? Were you trying to say Staphany and happening at the same time? I got that.
The Staphening.
Well, and I think this is what Evil Dead does really well, is it has these moments of camp, but they're kind of overlaid on just these grotesque moments of horror. So you don't know if you should laugh or be scared or what, and it generates a feeling of being uncomfortable. And I don't know of a horror franchise that does it better than this. Like, Evil Dead mixes camp and horror so well. Maybe the Scream franchise does it in a sense, but that's more meta than it is camp to me. So they're similar but different.
Yeah. I feel like there is a really unique feel to this series, and even though I absolutely adore the 2013 film, it doesn't feel the same way. And this movie felt like classic Evil Dead in a really fun way. Like the Deadites in this one are so nasty in like this like very aggressive, upsetting way. Like, just the things they say are like, oh, that was messed up. Holy cow.
See, I would argue that a little bit. Maybe we can kind of break that down when we talk about some of the things we didn't like. I felt the Deadites kind of were secondary to Ellie, the mom. Like, we can get into it a little bit later, but I think I would disagree with you there in some capacity.
Well, I mean, Ellie, I think, is the ultimate one in terms of just like saying the things that really, truly upset me. Like, once she becomes a Deadite, just,
she does
Mommy's
so
with
good.
maggots now.
Yeah. We have to give credit to that amazing actress, Alyssa Sutherland. You knocked it out of the park. You were terrifying.
Yeah, she's really phenomenal in this movie.
Also, what parents are like, they get the script of Evil Dead Rise and they're like, yeah, 8-year-old Nell Fisher, you can do this. This is good. It just kind of blew my mind a little bit that some of these kids, they have to have parent permission, and I wonder what those conversations were like.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those movies where I kind of go, oh, this child is going to have some trauma after this one. Yeah.
I think I loved Alyssa Sutherland so much as kind of the main Deadite, in the fact that, again, the setting of Evil Dead Rise was so different from what we'd seen before. The original Evil Dead, it's just a group of teenagers. We have the remake where it's kind of this drug intervention, and so they're college aged. And the original, I'm sure they were college age or teenagers. It doesn't really matter. The maturity shifted though in the remake, and here the maturity shifts again because having a mother be the source of all evil in the house was really spooky. And I don't think a lot of films have done that before, where the mom is now the terror, but like the supreme terror. There's always this kind of weird sense of empathy for the mom's plight. You know, we can think of Psycho or Mommy Dearest even. I don't know. I like that they leaned into it. Ellie was terrifying. There's the bathroom scene, the door scene, towards the end where she's screaming, "You will all be dead by dawn. You will all be dead by dawn." I'm just envisioning her piercing eyes in that peekaboo kind of door frame, and it just is giving me goosebumps.
Yeah, well, and what I love is that, like, she is saying these kind of weirdly comforting things that have this, like, horrendous logic to them that, like, it's this disconnect. Like she's singing lullabies, and she's, like, saying a lot of the right things, but it all has just this, like, weird edge to it when she's, you know, trying to persuade Cassie to open the door or things like that. Like, it's just this wonderful kind of unhinged disconnect between comforting mother figure who is this, you know, Amazon who's protecting her kids kind of thing, versus she is the threat, and she is using that against them.
Well, I think it goes back to what we love a lot about horror, is taking something that is so wholesome and pure. You know, we talk a lot about horror Christmas films, and I think this does it as well. You know, this family that is evolving based on times. The mother is, you know, her husband left. It's the sense of like, this family can do it. They can pull through. And then it flips it on its head, and it makes us hate the mother, and it's really twisted and dark, and it's so good.
Another thing I really liked, because I felt like all of the actors for the family were really solid.
I agree.
I feel like, you know, maybe some of the other secondary characters didn't quite deliver the performances I wanted, but at least the kind of the core family, who are the ones that we're really focused on, all of them were solid. Like, the little girl for Cassie, really solid, especially considering how messed up this movie is.
For real, though. Props, little girl. Wherever you are, you're probably going to be talking about this film in your therapy sessions when you're older.
Mm-hmm. And then, you know, the other, you know, two kids in the family who are, you know, the teenagers. Like, I really bought their family dynamic, right? Like, you can see that they care about each other, they love each other, they support each other, but they also are siblings who fight with each other and argue over stupid crap and get mad at each other over, you know, dropping the pizza box and all of that kind of stuff. Like, I believed their dynamic, which made it so much better, and, you know, better at being worse when things went really awry for them. You know, I actually cared about them, which is kind of an unusual thing for a lot of the Evil Dead movies, because it's usually like, I like Ash, and everyone else kind of don't care about.
Well, and they did that in such a short time, too. I think, I mean, short is a relative term, of course, but typically in the Evil Dead films, we don't really get a whole lot of kind of exposition about the characters and their backstories and all of that. And so they really are, you know, meat puppets, for lack of a better term. But this one, it took its time introducing these characters, kind of showing us this dynamic, and letting them kind of exist outside of the horror for a moment. Because you're right, I think the family dynamic was portrayed in a great way. They were all independent human beings, but they did exist and function as a cohesive unit. And that made it feel real. It made me care, because I could identify with, oh, I'm that sibling, and my sister is that sibling. They did it really well. You know, you say that now, and it makes you think about the film and how well that was executed.
Yeah, and what I love too is you know, the last family member, who we haven't talked about as much yet, though she is arguably kind of the main character by the end of it, is Beth, the sisters of Ellie / aunt to the kids. I really liked her dynamic as well, where she's kind of the, cool aunt, she's like a rock and roll chick, kind of, she blows in, has silly gifts for everybody, but she is there to get advice from her sister, and all of that felt very real. And even the tension that they had with each other, it's like, well, why didn't you tell me what was going on? I left voicemails. You never called me back. Those felt very real in terms of like how sometimes a loving but strained family dynamic is. And so I liked how Beth fit in, and then that as soon as there was a threat to her sister and to her, nibblings, which is, I learned the catch-all term for nieces and nephews.
Nope, I hate that.
It is. It's the term.
Oh, it's like Guncle. It just makes my skin crawl.
So anyway, the nibblings were being protected by Beth. But I like that she is quite competent. I mean, things go awry because it's really hard to account for how Deadites work. But like, I like that she was willing to face it because, she was standing up for people that she loved, even though she wasn't necessarily always in their lives. And like, by the end of it, yeah, she's hardcore. Like, she is willing to do some pretty upsetting things to win and protect Cassie by the end of the movie. And I really liked her as a character. I thought that she had a really cool dynamic as kind of the heroine to be cheering for, opposite how upsetting her sister Ellie is as kind of the big bad villain.
Well, and I also I like that she didn't know what was going on. Sometimes I think final girls, and we can extend that, final people, whatever, once the threat really kind of hits its plateau, they like snap together and they know what to do and they've got it all figured out, kind of a thing. And that's just not really authentic. And I think this film does a really good job of being chaotic. A lot of times horror movies are chaotic in a bad way, and this really leaned into chaos as chaos. And when the Naturum Demonto or whatever, when we were learning some of its lore, it talked a lot about kind of the chaos of the Deadites and how it was different from the Necronomicon. And I really think they executed that very, very well.
Yeah,
some people I've talked to about the film were actually a little frustrated because they felt like it was going all over the place. And I had to say, like, well, that was kind of the point. Like, it's chaos. These Deadites were the embodiment of chaos.
And what I like is that is both consistent with the series in terms of, kind of each film gives us different things, right? Like Evil Dead 1 and 2 kind of give us, the stereotypical, Kandarian demon Deadites that we think of. Army of Darkness gave us a whole army of undead creatures. Some were, winged monsters. Some were skeletons. They was kind of all over the place. Ash vs. Evil Dead has given us a whole bunch of different kinds of demons and monsters to run up against. And so this kind of having its own sort of unique blend of monstrousness really worked for me. It's that it was both familiar and different.
Yeah, I agree. I liked how they kind of created this Evil Dead verse as well. Mm-hmm. They brought in the Naturum Demonto, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we wrap up. But it kind of created, there are 3 books of the dead, and these 3 universes kind of surround them. And now are they connected? Are we all within Ash's purgatory in some sense? Like, the mystery behind the lore, I think, was a great setup for future films. Because they can go, they can create more books of the dead. We can go, I don't know, to Texas. Lord knows Evil Dead has already happened in Texas in real life. Or we could go to South America, Europe even. Like, let's expand the universe and do what they did here with the apartment building, which really was a character in and of itself, very Shining adjacent. Take that and let's go to the catacombs of France or Big Ben or wherever. I think it'd be really cool to explore.
I agree. I feel like it opened doors rather than kind of close them. A lot of times these series are just like, oh, hey, well, here's that one evil thing, and this is the one thing that makes everything bad happen. And in this case, it kind of opened it up and said, hey, there are more of these. Other things can happen. It could happen in different times and in different places, and that's okay, because now we can have, really off-the-wall approaches to the Evil Dead series. The only thing I can kind of compare that to would be, like, the movie Prey in the Predator series, where it's, such a different, like, time and place to have that kind of story. Well, we could have a very different time and place sort of Evil Dead story, and it could still work.
Yeah.
You mentioned The Shining. Yeah, there's a lot of nods to a bunch of different horror franchises. Obviously, mentioned all of the previous Sam Raimi work getting nodded to, but of course there's the really big nod to The Shining with the bloody elevator.
Oh, yeah. Huge nod. That was awesome.
Yeah, there were a bunch of other ones that I can't even remember now, but yeah, like the whole time I was watching the movie, I'm like, oh, that's a reference to this thing. That's a reference to this thing. And they're all gone now from my brain. I have to watch it again.
For sure.
And I enjoy that. I know sometimes people find that a little distracting, that's fair. But
as horror fans, I love a good Easter egg. It makes me feel like all of this knowledge I've put in my brain means something.
Yeah, like I tend to lean towards loving Easter eggs and incorporating them into my own writing and stuff like that. I can see why it can sometimes kick people out of an experience, because it's just like, oh, instead of thinking about this movie, I'm thinking about a dozen other movies instead. And I understand that argument, but for people who enjoy a good Easter egg, this movie is chock full of them. So I'm going to count that as a good. Something I really enjoyed in this movie, to kind of change gears a little bit, is that as far as kind of major story beats go and kind of how problem solving worked, we had different characters' expertise being brought to the table in interesting ways. So I like that basically things got started because the son, Danny, that Danny, when he finds the Naturum de Monto and the records, it's him knowing how to kind of manipulate records and kind of having his whole like mixing board, scratching, all of that kind of stuff. I sound like a total dweeb who knows nothing about this kind of music. But the fact that he knows how to do that is what allows him to play it back at a speed that's understandable, and that is ultimately what sets things off. So in this case, this was expertise being used for the bad. But then we see it come back again when they're trying to get more knowledge, and then we also have Beth using her knowledge of kind of how to just kind of makeshift weld things together for speakers and amps and all of that kind of stuff, which is, just her job, is knowing how to do that kind of thing. And that is what allows them to get more information. Those are just two small examples, but we see these characters using their expertise in interesting ways that solve problems that like other characters wouldn't necessarily be able to solve, or certainly wouldn't be able to solve, at least in the same ways. And I like that because it gives us more fleshed out characters that feel more dynamic and give each kind of unique perspective of each character more weight and value in the story.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, like we were talking about, it makes the characters more relatable because they're using what they know. Gosh, excuse me, in this universe, to kind of figure out how to respond to this threat. And it's not like Ellie or Beth or whomever. Danny just has this random hidden talent that all of a sudden saves the day. I really appreciated that as well. Here, writing into the show notes, probably the scene that I think is going to stick with so many people, but the cheese grater scene where a cheese grater is used to strip the flesh off of calf muscle. And I think that's all we need to say.
Yeah, I saw a thing, I think it was from a premiere or some sort of a thing promoting it, where I saw that the actresses for Ellie and Beth, so Alyssa Sutherland and Lily Sullivan, and they were like holding up a tiny cheese grater and like laughing and grinning, and I'm like, oh my gosh, yes.
That makes me hurt.
Yeah, it was like I think like a cheese grater earring or something like that. And there's like, we've emotionally scarred everybody.
Hooray!
And that is the kind of thing I love. Should we talk about that Bruce Campbell cameo?
Yeah, it was kind of a fun thing. I didn't quite catch it the first time I saw the film, but then the second time I'm like, oh my god, it's Bruce Campbell! When they are playing these vinyl records that Danny found in this
vault.
I don't know, this vault under this apartment complex. We'll get to that. The voice of the priest talking is actually Bruce Campbell.
Heck yeah.
So, way to go, Bruce.
And yeah, you got to have at least a little bit of Bruce Campbell. I mean, he even weirdly had a post-credit scene in the 2013 one, so
groovy.
Which I still don't know quite what that was indicating. I don't know. That's a whole different thing.
It's just groovy, Nathaniel. Let it be groovy.
Okay, you know what? That's fair. Who am I to question the great Bruce Campbell?
Fair. Let's kind of shift gears and talk about things that we maybe didn't appreciate as much or thought could be better.
Yeah. Let's kick this off with the wraparound story. You know, we like we mentioned, we have that cabin in the woods thing happening at the beginning, and then we have it kind of, you know, led up to at the very end of the movie, and it kind of just didn't add anything. Like there were some fun moments in those scenes. I thought, especially at the beginning, you know, getting a powerful drone to the head was pretty cool. The rising up out of the lake and, you know, having the words Evil Dead Rise right next to that was really kick-ass, but like besides that, it was kind of, I don't know, it just didn't add anything to the story. It was
real dumb. I don't know. I felt like they were just throwing that in the film to kind of give homage to the cabin in the wood story.
Mm-hmm.
And we just didn't need it. I don't know. None of the characters mattered. It was weird that they set it up right at the beginning. I don't know. I felt like the main story was going to tie somehow into this next story in a much more like prominent way, and it doesn't.
Yeah, it's just like literally like, hey, that girl walked through the really, you know, gross.
And she didn't call the cops?
Yeah.
What? I don't know. She took the book and then somehow read from the book. This very spooky book. I loved the design of the book.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about it, again, it starts to fall apart. I think this movie suffers from the macro-microcosm issue that we've talked a lot about on the show, where there are moments in the film that are sublime. They're beautiful, they're amazing, they're horrific, great horror. But when you take a step back and kind of look at it as a macro film, it starts to fall apart some places.
Yeah, and I would say, especially when it comes to this element in particular, it feels like a thing that suffers from what I've heard referred to as fridge logic, where it feels okay while you're watching it, but then 20 minutes after you're done with the movie and you're going to get a snack from the fridge, you know, that evening or something, it suddenly you go, wait a minute, That didn't actually do anything. Why was that there?
Yeah, you could have taken that out and the film would have been fine. The beginning and the end, it felt like some disjointed short film. I don't know. I was really bothered by that part. I appreciate what they were trying to do with the cabin in the woods. Don't think it was needed or it was executed very well.
Yeah, I feel like ultimately it made it a less tight film.
It almost felt like an extended credit scene to like introduce the actual story, which I also hate. Like just get to the point. I don't know. It really bothered me, as we can see.
Yeah. Another thing that kind of bothered me about this one is just that it felt very disconnected from like any actual location, right? Like, okay, this building is kind of this thing that exists in weird isolation, right? Like it doesn't feel connected to the other buildings around it. It doesn't feel like it's in any particular place in the world. They all have American accents, so I guess somewhere in the United States, I guess. But like, I don't know where. I don't know, really anything about where this is. And honestly, I felt to a point that like, because it was just such an isolated thing, this isolated location within this big city, that it was kind of a missed opportunity. Like when they said, we're going to make an Evil Dead that's in an urban setting, I thought, oh, this is going to be absolutely off the wall crazy, because they could have an entire city of infected, or possessed deadites everywhere. And it never got to that. In fact, it left that with that wraparound story.
Well, I
don't need that to be the entire story, but I was hoping that in the ending, that's where it would be going. Hey, we have a gazillion, monsters running around, basically, as opposed to, hey, we have like one hallway of people, that, I don't know, that there's like 4 more people than we usually get in an Evil Dead movie.
No, I fully agree. I was going to say that, with it being set in an apartment complex and the deadites being able to spread through blood, like, where was this crazy apartment complex that was just filled with deadites? And I think it would have made the end monster a lot more spooky and terrifying as if it was an amalgamation of hundreds of people rather than what we got, which was maybe
3.
6 or 8. Oh, it was just 3. That's right, the family.
Yep.
And it was gross in its own regard, but it was just a missed opportunity. And I don't know if maybe it was budget constraints or they wanted to kind of keep it centralized in that traditional Evil Dead kind of set of 5 or 6. I don't know. I was very hyped for this film. I understand that I was hyped, and I was kind of disappointed in quite a few sections. I do want to say I thoroughly enjoyed the film, and I can hold space for being disappointed and enjoying the film at the same time.
Yeah, that's honestly kind of how I feel about it too. Is that the things that I was hoping this movie would be would have been like a 10 out of 10 movie for me. That said, I don't know if they exactly were promising them. That's how I interpreted the information that I was given. And in my head, that was going to be this just bonkers movie that was just going to fulfill all of my dreams. What I was given was a very good movie, but it wasn't all of my dreams coming true.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Another weak thing, why is the Necronomicon in a bank vault under an apartment building?
Oh, Jesus Christo. Nathaniel, this was frustrating. I think mostly because I just went and saw the new Transformers, and they do something very similar, but it's under like this old Catholic church. This trope needs to be retired. Things just don't exist under modern buildings without people knowing about them. It's very hard nowadays to be like, oh, we had no idea this entire chapel was underneath this apartment complex, and there's this book of evil that is existing down there, and this like library. It takes me out of the fantasy because it's so comical almost.
Yeah, well, and I'm more willing to buy it if it's just like, oh, hey, yeah, I heard that they built this on top of an old church that, had to be torn down. Okay, I would buy that more than a church has a very big vault in a bank, and then it's the bank. Like, it added like one unnecessary step. Like, well, I'm willing to swallow some big pills, but that was just like a really weird one, right? Like,
and it was like very well preserved. Like, how long had this thing been around? It made it feel like almost Spanish conquistadors were the ones who had recorded this first summoning of these deadites. Like,
but also but it was recorded on vinyl. Right. And so like at extremos that'd be like early 40s? 1900s.
Yeah,
like 1920, 1930, 1940. So
I think our unison so says it all.
Yeah, it's just like it's a weird pill to swallow. Like I would have been just fine with like, hey, we found this weird thing online, and that would have been easier for me to buy than
and the earthquake completely dug up this entire cavern. Like earthquakes usually don't do that. It was like a whole building under a building. It just felt very convenient for the plot.
It was a plot device, not a thing that felt like would ever actually happen.
Exactly. And as someone who loves mythology and history and archaeology, like, hell, I almost got a sociology degree in my free time because I am so passionate about stuff like this. It just... it felt like a caricature of what archaeology and anthropology is really all about. And I know that makes me sound like a pretentious snob, but it just didn't deliver. In a film that was rooted in such reality as far as a family unit goes, this really dropped the ball when it came to introducing this new Necronomicon.
Yeah, and that's even like understanding that this is a very campy movie. Because like again, let's just look at how the other films handled it. Okay, they have a recording from a man who actually owns the cabin, who is an archaeologist and who discovered it. Okay, like that's silly, but
sure.
But as far as a reason for things to happen, well, okay, I can buy that though.
Right. He could have a summer cabin. He's an archaeologist. Like that sounds very authentically true.
Yeah, he put it there to try to keep it away from people once he learned what it was.
This was different.
Yeah, this was a couple steps more than that in a way that just didn't work.
I thought another part that I didn't really enjoy. Well, I enjoyed it. Again, I can hold space for two things. I thought the Deadites were rather circumstantial to the plot. They were fun. I thought a lot of the children's Deadites... Well, that's not true. I thought the Cassie... Is she the oldest?
No, she's the youngest.
Who was the oldest? Bridget.
Yeah.
I thought her Deadite was the best. She's chewing glass. She's the cheese grater. We think she's dead because Daphne got her way. But then she comes out of nowhere with this cool cloth. Very spooky, ooky. Ooh. Oh, that part was great. I love a background scene that just is subtle, and her coming out in the darkness in just this white bedsheet with blood-stained face. Oh, 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Outside of her, though, the other Deadites were just very meh.
Yeah. Like
Danny's Deadite, this awesome kid who does these cool things with records. he was just literally felt like a zombie. He had no scare factor at all when he turned Deadite.
Yeah, and like part of that was just, kind of timing. He turned into a Deadite like right at the end of Beth and Cassie deciding to get out of there. Like that was kind of the final straw. But yeah, we don't ever get to see him do anything fun or clever. The other ones in the hall don't really do anything fun or clever. It's pretty much just Ellie and Bridget are the scary ones. All of the other ones are just kind of in the way.
Yeah, even in the 2013 film, the Deadites were rather circumstantial, but they had a purpose. Each one of them filled part of this, pentagram 5-point prophecy to summon the abomination. And so they were mindless, and they were drones, basically. But every single one of them was unique, harrowing, and served a very good role in the plot.
Especially Mia's.
Yeah, this one, I mean, Ellie was phenomenal. The mother was incredible. And again, we talk about this film hyped us all up, and it really dropped the ball. And I think this was one of the bigger offenses. The Deadites were just outside of Bridget, not that scary. I didn't care.
Yeah, I liked the concept of the final monster along those lines to an extent, but yeah, it just felt a little disjointed from the rest of the movie. It just
from the lore, even.
Yeah, like and okay, some of that was kind of in there with what the illustrations we see in the Notorum de Monto and all of that. I just, if they're gonna go with a weird, multiple bodies fused together into one horrifying monstrosity idea, go big or go home. And I felt like they went medium.
Got to see it.
Yeah, you barely get to see it. It's just, I don't know, it should have been all of them, and it should have been way more of them by the time it got downstairs. Or they should have just not worried about that and had it be just, kind of a frantic, wild fight to the end. I don't know. I like the idea of kind of the final boss fight.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we had that with, the 2013 with the Abomination. It was awesome, but it made sense. This, I felt, I don't know if you remember, Nathaniel, but I DM'd a Curse of Straw D&D campaign, and I literally, like 2 years ago, tapped into the zeitgeist of horror, I guess, and created I called them flesh homunculi, which were exactly what they did. And so part of me was like, hey, they stole my idea! But also, it just fell flat. I don't know. I was more terrified by Ellie's Deadite form than I was this beast. Because I think part of the horror of Evil Dead is watching your friends and family become these demons that will do terrible things. Think back to 2013, with sawing your jaw off with a broken bottle or chopping your arm off with a turkey saw. And watching that and the humanity that is still being shown. And so to have this like creature feature in Evil Dead, I don't know. Max did not like it.
Like, again, I think it fits within, like, the greater universe in that it feels more Army of Darkness.
Sure.
But again, Army of Darkness, I would argue, is probably the weakest entry in the series. I still like it a lot, but it's, a little bit more on the kind of just fun, wacky side of things. And this felt like they were trying to go with both this, like, wacky idea and try to make it scary, and it didn't quite stick the landing. If you're going to do that, you have to go more like in The Last of Us 2. This big boss fight that's relatively near the end of the game is this horrifying monstrosity called the Rat King, where it's like literally 40 infected people all just kind of merged together in this one giant monstrosity. And when that happens in the game, it's really upsetting. This was 3, and it was just, I don't know, it just didn't stick the landing as much, which is a shame. I guess along those lines, I just wanted this movie to be scarier, right? Like,
Yep.
I feel like some moments were really chilling, and other moments were just, not. I had a fun time the whole movie, but I wanted it to be a scarier movie. Like, I thought that this would be one where, we'd go and, like, I'd have a hard time sleeping that night. No, not at all.
Same. And maybe the 2013 film kind of set that expectation for us, which is fine, understandable, and reasonable. But if you're going to make a sequel, we've talked about this ad nauseum on the show, can't fall in the trap of that sequelitis. You have to go bigger and badder and scare us again, because we know what to expect this time. We know what a deadite is. We've seen the gore that the 2013 film gave to us. If you don't match that and go further, we're going to get bored. And I was kind of bored in some parts. I hate saying that because Evil Dead is awesome.
Yeah. I also wanted this movie to be a little bit funnier.
Oh, see, I didn't. I thought the camp was weird, but I wasn't expecting camp.
Yeah, well, I think I just wanted it to have more of the dark sense of humor in terms of, like, how the Deadites were taunting them. We get little glimmers of it. We get some, like, really, nasty things that are kind of like, oh, okay, like, that's, a little funny to hear that said, or things like that. But, like, I guess I just wanted it tonally to be more similar to the Ash vs. Evil Dead series, where I felt like that series did a really wonderful job of giving us some very good scares and also being very funny. I don't necessarily need it to be as funny, but I just feel like, the Evil Dead series does a really good job of giving me scary and funny, and I felt like this was a little bit tame on both of those fronts. And yeah, like, it can have a nasty sense of humor, but I wanted just a little bit more of that.
And I think I'm the opposite side of the coin, in that I wanted it to be
bleak,
dark. I wanted that 2013. I watched that film, and again, I didn't watch horror for a few days because I was so disturbed by what I saw, and I thought this, it's 10 years later, it's going to be even worse. And I'm thrilled about it. And I left that theater being like, Stranger Things was scarier at some points. So, it's funny that, sometimes the things we want in a film are some of the criticisms, and I understand that, maybe that's not the right way to look at it, but that's how we do.
Yeah. Again, I love that we can both love this movie and also have things that we didn't love about it.
Yeah, we're critics. This is what we do.
Yeah. So now let's get into our lingering questions, because I feel like the Evil Dead series has never done the best job of clearly spelling out a lot of its lore. We have arguably a fairly sizable body of work now that we can kind of look at, right? We've got 5 movies and 3 seasons of a TV show. And I still feel like I have a lot of questions. So the first one is, are the Deadites in this movie, and by extension also in the 2013 movie, are they Kandarian demons? Or are they some other kind of demon? It seems like they're probably different types of demons, right? Like, is that your interpretation?
Yeah, I mean, keep going with your thought, and I'll give you what I feel.
Okay, well, because we have the Necronomicon Ex Mortis in the Evil Dead films, the original trilogy. Sure. Then we have the Naturam de Monto of 2013, and the Naturam de Monto of this one, which I think is at one point at least once referred to as a Necronomicon. Now, Naturum de Monto is basically like Italian, or kind of a bastardization of Italian, for Book of the Dead. Necronomicon Ex Mortis is Book of the Dead. So are they the same thing? Are they different things? Is the Necronomicon Ex Mortis one of the volumes of the Naturum de Monto? We find out that there are 3 volumes in this second one. So is the first volume the one that we saw in 2013? Is that the third volume? Is Necronomicon Ex Mortis one of those? I don't know. It seems like, maybe each book is kind of connected to different types of demons and are going to summon different demons. And if I had to guess, it's probably what they're maybe going for is Naturum de Monto. There's 3 volumes of that. We'll see the third one in whatever the next Evil Dead movie is. We've seen the first 2. And then Necronomicon Ex Mortis is related but isn't the same.
Yeah, so if I throw my, rogue demonologist hat on, one day I'm going to get an actual certificate that labels me as such. I think if we... this is going to make me sound so nerdy, but it's fine. If we look at different world cultures, we're going to see a lot of similarities and a lot of differences, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So if we take a look at the Necronomicon, how I interpreted this in some capacity is there are these 3 different sections where some cult or some organization was trying to summon a demon, and they all kind of got to the same location, but in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I think in this film, we have a variety of Deadite. When we look at the 2013 film, we have a different variety. I think that is very sadistic, very cruel. And in this film, while they're sadistic and cruel, they're also chaotic. So they might all be Kandarian demons, but I think based on whoever wrote that book summoned a variant or a different type of demon based on kind of what their goal was or what they were trying to accomplish. And in some capacity, I think this is a really good interpretation of the idea of Legion, where we are not one but many, that they're all kind of the same demon, but they are different factions or variants or types. But the end goal for all of them is murder and blood and gore and evil.
Yeah.
My goal in life is to figure out who Legion is, of course, because we've talked about, I am Legion when we watched Wreck and Quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
So we have him again. I think they are different books written by different people, but the zeitgeist of culture has created them to be very similar. Because in reality, throughout history and mythology, there's millions of books of the dead. There's not just, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and then everyone else is not,
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has their own interpretation of death and their books of the dead. So that's my soapbox of demonology for you.
Yeah, and I agree. I think in terms of the lore of this universe, I wouldn't be surprised if, maybe the Necronomicon Ex Mortis is specifically summoning one type of demon that's a little funnier.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what is a Kandarian demon, or maybe these are all Kandarian demons and there's different subsections. I don't know what their intent is there.
Because you could say, the OG, that's the mad, kind of crazy, lunatic Kandarian demon. Still sowing evil, but in kind of an unhinged way. Then you have the 2013, which I would say is the sadistic one, who just loves causing and watching pain. And then you have this one that gets his jigglies off, or however the cliche is said, for the chaos, just seeing the panic and the paranoia and the insanity of it all. It's the same demon, but different flavors.
Yeah. I want to get your thoughts on another thing that the internet seems to be hotly debating. Is the Bruce Campbell cameo character, who seems to be a priest, do you think that is just a priest who happens to be played by Bruce Campbell as well, or is that Ash? Because in in the original trilogy, we do see Ash, get thrown in a time portal. He messes up spells. It's not super clear cut how he kind of goes from end of Army of Darkness to getting back to his regular, quote unquote regular life. When we see him much later in his life with Ash versus Evil Dead. So do you think that maybe among other things he might have been traveled to multiple times and encountered Deadites a few times, and this is just maybe one of them?
It's a fun idea, and I can see where people would find that. But if A Bug's Life taught me anything, sometimes a rock is just a rock. And I think it was more Bruce Campbell wanting to come back and have fun in this franchise that has made him so successful, rather than this kind of complicated multiverse of Evil Dead Bruce Campbell. So I get it. I think that's fun, and it is a clever idea. But I think this is a classic case of sometimes a rock is just a rock.
Okay, I agree with you. I think if this was Ash, he would have been way more smarmy and absurd and less helpful, because that's Ash.
Yeah.
I love Ash so much, but I also love to kind of despise him a little bit, because he's just the biggest prick.
I cannot see Ash
as a religious figure.
Yeah, like a pious, calm religious figure. If he was, he'd be making some sort of boob joke while reciting this. Or if he knew what the Deadites were, why wouldn't he warn people? Anyway, I think we're on the same page.
Yeah, it's a fun fan theory. I don't think it actually holds up, though, because Ash is such a unique character. And and it's just the ultimate likable sleazebag.
Here we go. Likable sleazebag. I hate that I love that so much.
That's Ash for you, though.
That is true. That is true. Watch Ash v Evil Dead, and you will see how sleazy a sleazebag can be.
Oh my gosh, he's so wonderfully sleazy in that.
All right, Nathaniel, let's talk about Screams and Crowns. What are you giving it?
Screams wise, I'm going to give this a 6.5. How about you?
I gave it a 6. It had those moments, but really didn't execute like I wanted it to.
Yeah, I really hoped that this would be a 9 or 10, but it wasn't. But it's fine. Crowns wise, though, I gave this movie an 8. I really had just a wonderful time watching it. Regardless of what I want this movie to be, I had so much fun, and I just... this is the first time I've been able to see, something from this franchise in a theater, and that was a lot of fun. I really like this series a lot, and it was just a great time. You and me going and watching some Evil Dead.
That is right. I gave it a 7 for similar reasons. It's a fun film. I will probably watch it at my Halloween horror movie-thon. I just wanted it to go a little bit further with itself.
Mm-hmm.
So that is me.
So, Max, how are you staying spooky lately?
Oh my
Other
gosh.
than the, hellscape nightmare that is moving.
Ugh, get ready, because Max has a new obsession.
Ooh.
I have been traveling a lot for work, and one of my new favorite podcasts is Morbid Podcast. Ash and Elena, you guys are awesome. Shout out. They kind of dissect true crime stories, but they really focus in on the victims of true crime. And they told this one story, which was fascinating to me. It happened in 1993 in West Memphis, Arkansas. About 3 8-year-old boys were found in a river. They were mutilated. It was a horrific, horrific murder. One of the boys was castrated. Trigger warnings all around here. The 3 boys were just brutally, brutally murdered. And the police department at the time was really biased because Satanic Panic was going strong. And they found these 3 boys who were into Wicca and wore black and loved Metallica and AC/DC. And without any real concrete evidence, were able to convince a 24-panel jury that they were guilty of 3 counts of murder, and they rotted in jail for 18 years. It is the kind of the background and the inspiration from Eddie in Stranger Things season 4, kind of where he's the pariah of town, and so everyone just assumes all the bad things happen because of him.
Mm-hmm.
So I have watched documentaries now. I just bought a book called The Devil's Knot, which talks about how none of the evidence links these 3 boys to the murder scene at all. There's no logical evidence that makes sense. They were actually exonerated kind of back in 2011. So they're out of jail now, but they are still guilty for the murders. They did what's called an Alford plea, which is a very special legal type of maneuver where they assume guilt while maintaining innocence. Basically, they're just waiting for technology to catch up and allow better evidence to come forth. So I could go on and on and on. I'm kind of obsessed with it right now. I highly recommend watching a documentary series. It's called Paradise Lost. It's on HBO Max. Peter Jackson got involved. This crime caused a lot of like celebrity fervor as well. He did an amazing documentary as well called West of Memphis that came out in 2003, I believe. So highly recommend. It's a crazy story. Talks a lot about how religious fervor and the witch trials are not done. They just are manifesting in different ways. So that's me. Nathaniel, what are you doing? Poor Mark is probably sick and tired of me, cooking taco soup while I listen to evidence about death.
Well, I have been staying spooky by playing through the Evil Dead, or not Evil Dead. Okay, Resident Evil 4 remake. See, still got Evil Dead in my mind. I mean, I could be playing Evil Dead too. They do have a video game.
That's fair. Not that great.
Yeah, it's fine. But yeah, no, the Resident Evil 4 remake. So this, if you want to go all the way back to my origin story, in our first episode, in terms of kind of how I got into horror, Resident Evil 4 specifically was a big part of kind of what fueled my passion for the genre, and so. Of course, as soon as they dropped this remake version of it, I had to get it. And y'all, Resident Evil 4 is such a freaking great game. And this remake does the original justice. It makes it much more playable for a modern era. So you don't have to stop to shoot, which is not great when you're getting chased by monsters. But it just really delivered very well on. Kind of updating the game and how rough around the edges it was, because I mean it was 20 years old almost, and just really kind of bringing it up to a modern standard. The graphics look great. The story updates, they make some minor tweaks, but they work really well. We still have like a lot of the campiness that makes Resident Evil wonderful. But also, just great scares in the game, great combat. It's just fun. I freaking love that game. I played it way too fast. And as soon as I beat it, I immediately just wanted to play it again. I love Resident Evil 4. So yeah, that's the big way I've been staying spooky. And then of course, besides that, just getting ready for StokerCon. So again, if any of you are there at StokerCon, say hi, please. I will be very shamelessly plugging this podcast.
Well, and we are coming up on our 100th episode, which is pretty exciting for us.
Heck yeah.
So if you have anything you want to hear or listen to for our big 100, let us know. We're trying to figure out what the best thing is.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to hear ideas for how to approach our big landmark episode.
For real, that would be cool. So, in the meantime, stay spooky.
Stay spooky.
Need even more Scream Kings? Here's our obligatory shameless social media plug. Follow us on Twitter or Instagram at Scream Kings Pod. You could also email us at screamkingspodcast@gmail.com. Help us reach a wider audience of horror fans by leaving a review on iTunes or by sharing a link on social media. You can also support the show by going to patreon.com/Scream Kings. Stay spooky.